More of the impact of the global economic collapse of capitalism in 2008 is now starting to show itself. According to a New York Times article, tens of thousands of more young people are homeless since the last recession. The New York Times article does detail growing problem. Many of these people, these young people that are now homeless, they have college credits, like even sometimes long work histories. Workers between the ages of 18 and 24 have the highest unemployment rates of all of the adult population. Those who can move back home with their parents, the so-called boomerang set, are the lucky ones. But that is not an option for those whose families have been hit hard by the economy, including Mr. Taylor, whose mother is barely scraping by while working in a laundromat. Without a stable home address, they are an elusive group that mostly couch surfs or sleeps hidden away in cars or other private places, hoping to avoid the lasting stigma of public homelessness during what they hope will be a temporary predicament. Now, this is a phenomenon that is starting to grow and is starting to become a bigger problem within our society. The national homeless population, one that poverty experts do seem to have an agreement on. The caseworkers for things like this, they are saying that this is a problem that is growing and is actually becoming bigger by the day. Now, the reason why this has gone largely unnoticed by the population and by the media, aside from the fact it's the bourgeois media, is that programs for the homelessness do tend to focus primarily towards like families or people that are much older, people my age in their 30s, or people in their 40s and 50s, and to some degree the actual elderly. But not a lot of it is actually focused on young people, because young homeless people are less likely to seek out any kind of assistance because they are younger. A lot of the homeless shelters that exist in major cities like New York and Chicago, places like that, the beds that are provided overnight, particularly in the winter, are mostly taken by older people, because they do have a much harder time surviving a winter night while homeless. Because younger homeless people tend to have much better health than obviously older homeless people. They tend to choose to stay away from shelters and stuff like that because they are strong enough to survive those kind of elements on their own, and are, because of the less amount of time that they have spent on the street, still have very much the stigma that society places on homeless people in their minds, so they are less likely to actually go out and seek that help. But this is a problem that is, according to experts, is on the rise. Those who provide services to the poor in many cities say the economic recovery has not relieved the problem. Years ago, you didn't see what looked like people of college age sitting and waiting to talk to a crisis worker because they are homeless on the street, said Audrey Bailey, the executive director of the Community Food and Outreach Center, one of the largest charitable organizations in Florida. Now, that's a normal thing. Now, a lot of these new people that are homeless, as I said, they have college credits. Some of them even have college degrees, because this is the kind of climate that we're coming into. One of those suffering that was detailed in the article was Lance Fuller. He's 26 years old. He has a degree in journalism, and he also has a popular blog. Thankfully, I have a girlfriend who is willing to let me stay with her until I get back on my feet again, said Mr. Fuller, who writes a blog, Voices of the Lost Generation. It's really hard for people in my generation not to feel completely defeated by this economy. What we are witnessing, definitely, is the crumbling social conditions as a result of capitalism. As the global collapse of capitalism in 2008 has been devastating the economy, the somewhat of a recovery that has happened has completely benefited, pardon the expression, the 1%. It has tremendously only benefited the capitalist class, and even then, only among the upper strata of the capitalist class, announcing higher and higher bank profits, stuff like that. Now, the regular mom and pop, like, kind of little symbol that we get of what the free market is, that, you know, a mom and pop organization assuming their own risk, not what the vast majority of capitalism actually is, but the nice little image that we get about it to invoke sympathy for it, they're not really getting this. There's been somewhat of a recovery for people like that, but this has primarily gone to, as they say, the 1%. Now, these social conditions are breaking down. There's now less opportunity for young people than there was possibly ever before, say, like the Industrial Revolution, say a time like that, within the modern capitalism that we do live in today, that all of us were actually alive for. It's breaking down. The economic system is not working. The opportunity for young people is not there anymore. And as a result of this, young people are not just like a vast majority who are now unable to afford to go to college. The people who want to go to college and university but don't end up doing so, the majority of those people, for largely through financial concerns, because they cannot afford to go to school, thus concentrating further education into the hands of a wealthier strata of the population. Many of them are actually, who in some cases can't afford it, are just turning around and saying, I'm not going to go because what's the point? They're becoming very defeatist about this because they're not seeing anywhere to go. They're looking at, college kids that have, these degrees, people like university degrees, who either have minimum wage jobs or they're homeless. So they're seeing that this promise of a better life through education is not panning out. Are you better off with an education than without one? Of course you are. You're always better with more education. But the way education is set up in capitalism is that it is an investment. You invest the money and the time to go and get the education to presumably to pay off in the end by going somewhere and getting more money, having a higher living standard. But this is breaking down. So now it becomes a bigger risk. Do I go to school, pile on this monumental debt to end up in the same place that I did before I went to college, ending up homeless like a lot of these other college kids and a lot of these other young people are doing? So now that investment of going to school is now a bigger risk than it was, say, 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So we can see, definitely within the whole sphere of capitalism, it's actually breaking itself down, and it's de-incentivizing actually getting education. I mean, that's supposedly one of the great things about capitalism, is that it gives you the opportunity to use your skills to the greatest degree and gives people the incentive to want to get those skills because they'll be paid better, while it says that in socialism and communism this doesn't exist, that people have no incentive to go to school and want to do it, which completely contradicts reality because Cuban medical schools are packed full every year. The Western countries, probably Western European countries, the ones that are social, not socialist, but social, do have particularly higher rates of skilled workers. There's a greater ratio of skilled to unskilled workers, meaning greater towards the skilled side in Cuba than there is in most Western industrialized nations. People still want to go to school. In the Soviet Union, the medical schools were packed every single year because people wanted to go to school, because they knew there was going to be work and they didn't have to bury themselves in debt to actually go to those schools. I've seen for one of the Oliver Stone films where he was with Castro, I believe it was called Comandante. He was speaking to poor kids from the Bronx who were Latin American, who went to Cuba to go to medical school for free. But there's no incentive. It's just one of those ridiculous arguments made by capitalism. The social system, the incentive system that by which everything can be based off of, supposedly, is breaking down. And now what's really affecting it is the risk young people have to take in order to go to school. They don't go to school anymore because it's a gamble. It's an investment. And that investment is increasingly in more cases, not paying off, thus de-incentivizing going to school to begin with. I mean, this is just one of those ridiculous contradictions of capitalism. It will pay out taking this risk, but the risk is de-incentivizing people from taking it. It's just one of those just completely ridiculous contradictions of capitalism that Marx pointed out. And hopefully something can come along to help a lot of these young people that are struggling to survive.